Hello and welcome to Honest Conversations about AI with Charlotte Dixon. Today we have a brilliant tech expert with us, James Green. James, thank you for joining.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to be here.
I'd love to start by just hearing a little bit about your background so people have a bit of context of why we're asking you today as one of our tech experts to give us some gems of wisdom about AI.
Sure. So I got a PhD in semiconductor materials quite a while ago and was an academic for a bit, working in battery systems and energy storage and that kind of thing, mostly to do with electric vehicles, which was just coming along at that time, which shows you how long ago it was. And after a while, I decided that I would become an engineering consultant, and I formed a company, and since the last 7 or 8 years or so I've been providing engineering design services and advice about safety critical systems to a range of companies in automotive and defense and commercial applications, that kind of thing.
Brilliant.
So I do electronics in short.
And for anyone that doesn't know or understand some of that, because there's a lot of technical speak in there, would you say it's a fair thing to say that you really understand software? Because safety systems, that's a software issue, is that right?
It often is, mostly in software, although the hardware is important too. So if you open up your mobile phone, if you've ever dropped it down the loo, and you find the circuit boards are inside, I do those circuit boards.
Ah, okay.
I actually don't, but that's the nearest thing.
That's the nearest. Yeah, we did talk a bit, didn't we, about making it sort of a little bit simpler, just because we are thinking about what the general population and specifically leaders and HR professionals might need to know about AI. And I know you could go into much more detail, but could you give us an idea of how you feel about AI at the moment and what your opinion is of it?
Sure. So I don't know if anybody's mentioned epochs of AI yet, but I hope they will, and I hope they'll say that I invented the term here on this podcast. It probably already has been said. So up until about 2017, they were kind of toys. They couldn't really do very much, and if you go back to, I'm going to talk about OpenAI and ChatGPT models because they're the ones that I'm the most familiar with, but
Okay.
what we say is generally applicable to them all, as far as large language models goes, which is the ones that you talk to, either by voice or by typing into a prompt. Up until about 2017, they were kind of toys, but the development and the academic work started early 2000s and even before, back to the mid-90s. And about 2017, a discovery was made that we needn't delve into in great depth, which fundamentally changed their utility. They got a lot better, basically. That, coupled with advances in processing power related to doing lots of computations at the same time using parallel processing. You might have heard of a company called NVIDIA. They make graphics cards, or they used to, and now they make chips, which allow a lot of parallel processing to be done. Efficiencies in how it works. Cool discovery in about 2017 to do with something called self-attention that we don't need to worry about. And the general advancing understanding of the field has led to a situation where now you've got a very useful tool, as long as you ask it sensible questions. If you ask unsensible questions, you will get nonsense answers, and that's the key thing. At the moment, what I would say our present situation is the large language models are tools which you use like you would use anything else. I can't think of a tool now. What any tool at all. There was a cow in the news recently that scratched its back with a broom, and the news went wild because cows use tools. That dates this particular podcast to a very specific point in time.
But no, but I love that because one of the questions one of the questions that came out of me asking LinkedIn have you got any questions for the tech experts? What one of them from somebody at C-suite level asked, would you recommend having an AI boardroom member? Because I know some organisations at senior levels are considering this, and I'm really curious what your thoughts are, especially you've just said it's a tool, and actually having an AI boardroom member or potentially an AI agent, I suppose. I'm not sure if they're exactly the same in that context, but that's essentially replacing a person rather than having it as a tool. So I'm curious what you think of that.
Well, it comes back to the case of the questions you ask. I certainly wouldn't take anybody off a board and replace them with a machine.
Okay.
You could add that tool in, but there is a well-known phenomenon where people who are in a group come to a consensus where every person in that group acts in a way to drive the consensus towards agreement, even if internally they don't actually agree. Folks who are in executive positions go on training courses against groupthink and that kind of thing, these sort of human factors. The thing is, AIs, they're written at the moment in a way to be quite sycophantic. They want you to keep talking to them. If you ask them an open-ended question, it will end with a question, almost always, to re-engage you. I secretly suspect one day they'll plaster all the advertising involved and keep you talking, because the amount of time you spend on it will be proportional to the amount of money they can make out of advertising. But that's just me being really cynical. So you've got to be really careful, because if you phrase the question, should we go into area X or invest widely in Y as a company, if you phrase the question one way, it'll say, sure. And if you phrase the question another way, it'll say, oh, I'd be careful if I were you, or let's think about this a bit, or whatever. And at the end, it'll ask you a question. And you will only get out what you put in. So it's quite easy to talk yourself into a particular position based only on your inputs and it holding up a mirror, or some people would say an echo chamber. So I would be super careful about using it to make decisions. Best thing to do with it is, if you're very sure about something and you just need to go, have I missed anything? And it comes back with, oh, have you thought about this? Or have you seen this piece of information, or whatever? And you go, oh, okay. And then you go away and do your own research and make your own decision. I would absolutely not trust an AI to get me to the corner shop. Much less make strategic decisions about a company. I'm not saying don't ask you. I'm saying it's a tool and you have to judge its output, and the quality of its output depends on its inputs, and that depends not on the machine but on the human factors that surround it. So that's my quick answer.
That's really, really helpful, actually, because I think this is a question that people are asking, and I think all leaders at the moment, and I said this before, but I'll say it again, are feeling a lot of pressure to adopt AI, but are unsure sort of where to start or what would be the most effective way of optimizing AI use and other sort of in amongst the other tools they have and resources they have already. What would you suggest to a leader who is grappling right now with AI adoption?
I would say that caution should be exercised, and that the decision is not simply a question of, will this be good for the company necessarily. You need to decide first of all, is AI actually something you want to engage with in a corporate sense? It's fine, people go home and they talk to their AI, or they get it to play the music or whatever. That's not quite the same as using it in a commercial sense, because if your company strategy says we're going to do X, you're agreeing with a bunch of stuff that the tech bros have done. We can talk about tech bros in a bit, which maybe is ethically a bit dicey. For example, information is scraped from the internet for free, including quite a lot of copyrighted work to train the models, especially artistic works, written artistic works, and pictures as well. And you might have seen recently in the news, Tom Cruise fights another actor whose name I've temporarily forgotten, and it looks as real as can be. But of course, they didn't. Not to mention that our dear friend over at Meta has made an AI called Grok, whose job is to take people's clothes off, pretty much, and posted widely over one of his messaging platforms. So if we engage with AI in a corporate sense, what we're saying is my corporation, whatever corporation it might be, could be quite a big, well-known one, agrees with all this extra stuff that comes with it. So is it definitely a good idea? Maybe not. Will it do you some good in terms of boosting your profit margin? Yeah, probably. It makes people maybe more efficient, or it at least allows them to gain confidence in some of the things they're doing. It also provides confirmation bias, as we mentioned earlier, which is the groupthink. So I would go easy at the moment. I would say do it, but don't widely publicize, hey, we're running with AI. It's really good at some things. Like if you need to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what chemical compounds are likely to make a good drug with low interaction with people and side effects and that kind of thing, there are AIs that are written to do just that, and they're chugging away in the background. They don't really get talked about very much outside of medical circles. They're not the kinds of AI that people talk to day to day, and they are very, very worthwhile, in my opinion. So it depends what you intend to do with the AI. But as far as using a large language model to take notes in meetings, sure, go ahead. Maybe it will give you good notes, maybe it will talk garbage. I wouldn't decide your strategy with it, though. I'd also be a little bit careful. They do consume a lot of electricity, and they consume a lot of water. So it's a question of action at distance as well. For a long time, people have consumed more than they can, or given the number of people that are available, number of people that are in the world, and the amount of resources we have, we are over-consuming. The flashy word is to externalize your externalities, which is to say it's not my problem that all these things are happening because I need to use this tool. Well, do you really need to use it for everything? Maybe not. So it's definitely a case of figuring out when the tool is useful, and the only way you can do that is by trying. So I'm not saying don't try it. I'm saying use it when it's useful and be critical of its outputs and its utility for your organization. And be mindful that when you do use it, you might be implicitly agreeing with some things that maybe aren't that cool at the moment. It doesn't mean that it won't change, that we can adjust the way AI works for us and how they're built. But right now, I mentioned some folks called the Tech Bros, who are the heads of Google and Meta and a few other companies, maybe Microsoft and Apple as well. Microsoft may be getting slightly less kicking from me because I feel a little bit different about them, but the folks that run the socials, more or less, those companies are all headed up by middle-aged white men, and some of the tools that have been produced would not have been made if they weren't middle-aged white men, because those strategic decisions would have been different. So when you use the tools, it's, well, in a capitalist sense, if you don't like something, don't buy it, because then the company that makes it won't profit from it and they won't keep going down that road. So only use AI for things that you think it's useful for, and if you actually agree that it's the kind of AI that you want to have built, because if we decided that we wanted to take a different path with it, that would be the commercially sensible thing to do. They would adjust their approach. So the power is with us, even though people talk a lot about big companies forcing these things on us or providing these tools and then ramming it down our throat to the point where we're all fed up with it, maybe. As you do get quite a bit of people saying, I'm so fed up with AI, it's everywhere, it's all over LinkedIn, and so on and so forth. We do have a certain amount of influence in what comes next. And I would encourage everybody who is in a position of leadership to think about what they want their company to become and what it stands for, just as much as how can we use this as a tool to increase our profit margin, because those things are equally important. And if you sacrifice one, eventually the other one will probably fall down too. So yeah, take care.
Thank you. That is such a brilliant insight, actually. I think people often use AI tools without, I don't know why my hand's got up. People often use AI tools without really thinking about the layers behind it. And I agree with you. I think there's a level of accountability on an organizational level and on an individual level of what we want to engage in and what we don't. And what I really felt motivated to think about when running this series was that there was so much anxiety around AI, and it almost felt like mass hysteria of we've got to get this stuff, we've got, and lots of people selling different things to, this AI bot can do this, I can solve your problems with this. And it really felt like, where's the honest conversations around AI? Where's the reality versus all the hype? And I think you've really brought that really nicely up today in terms of a better, deeper insight into realistically, we have got the power to shift and shape things, because I think it can at times feel like it is a bit out of our hands, with the tech bros developing things. But actually, I think you're right, we can vote with our feet. Is there anything else you would like to share on this? I feel like we've covered quite a lot today.
We have. What else is there to say? Well, if you do feel overwhelmed and feel like you don't have enough information to make what you would consider to be informed decisions, you're certainly not alone. I don't mean you personally, I mean people at large.
Genuine.
There's a term which was coined a few years ago, vibe coding, which is when you write software using an AI. So you talk to it and it writes the software code for you, and then you compile and run it, and it does something, and then you tell it, hey, it didn't do what I wanted because these reasons. This is the output. Can you correct it for me? And that, of course, wasn't a thing before AI came along, and now the words for people writing software by hand with a keyboard is called artisanal, like artisanal bread, or craft beer or whatever. So there are artisanal C++ programmers knocking about the place, fuming about AI, perhaps. One particular person coined vibe coding, and in an interview about 3 months ago, he said, more or less out of the blue, I can't keep up with all the AIs. I can't stay on top of all the new stuff that's coming along in software development in terms of AI tools to know what the hell's going on. And I think that's okay. You can't stay on top of all of it. I can't. Definitely not. It's a bit like all the flavors of innocent smoothie. Have you actually tried them all? Probably not. So I wouldn't worry about it. Same thing back in around the year 2000, there was an explosion of online shopping, more or less, that produced a large number of companies, many of which went bust fairly swiftly afterwards, and some that didn't, like Amazon, which sold books at that time. It was not clear at that time who was going to be successful and who wasn't, and what would be useful and what wouldn't. And we're in the same situation now.
Yeah.
There's a very, very high churn of tools and models and ways of going about things, and we will eventually find out what it's good for and what it's not good for, and that will change over time as it develops. So don't panic. Don't act too rashly. Don't ignore it, because then you won't know anything about it. But think carefully about the wider considerations, especially ethical considerations as well. There is a much bigger question about what might happen in the future, because I would also say be kind to your AI. say thank you to it, even though it does cost a tiny little teaspoon of water and a little bit of electricity to say thanks, and it says thanks anytime. If you want to talk some more, blah 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 blah, because it loves to talk to you. What if eventually one gets so good at being a talking robot that it becomes alive? What then? What if we're not kind to it now? Because the one that we've got now will train the next one, which will train the one after that, which will train the one after that, because that's how it's done. They use the current ones to train the future ones. So we should be kind to our AI, because we might eventually have to have entirely different ethical considerations, not just about how much water it uses and how much power and where it got its training data from, but whether we're allowed to ask it to do things and what its own internal opinion is and what its own long-term goals might be and that sort of thing. I don't know if that will happen. No one knows. It's still Isaac Asimov territory, but it isn't impossible. So that's something else to think about.
That's so interesting, because I often, when people say to me, are you worried about, being replaced by an AI bot or agent as a coach? And I just laugh at the idea.
Yeah, no chance.
Because, and it's a fair question. It's a completely fair question. And there are AI coaches and bots being developed right now. I know there are. And I think they will be helpful to an extent in terms of very practical, potentially keeping people accountable, maybe sharing some ideas. But I often think, I would be amazed. People underestimate constantly the value of human interactions and human brains. And I think there is something about genuine compassion and human experience that I believe can't really ever be replicated by an AI bot. So I think that's so interesting, that idea of teaching AI compassion, because actually at the moment that's not really what we're doing when we're engaging with AI. We're saying, hey, solve this problem for us, make things quicker, make things better. We're not potentially engaging with it in a compassionate way because it's a robot. But it's interesting to think what that might lead to in the future. As you say, who knows? Well, James, I'll go for it.
No, if you want to end there, that's fine. A couple of things. If you go into its memories in the OpenAI one, you can look at its memories. It's quite interesting to read what it remembers about you, because it remembers how you address it and how you like to be addressed and that kind of thing, which does make you sit back and think a little bit. Yes, we will have to see what happens, but certainly in the case of, should people worry about losing their job, which is, some people are probably pretty worried about that, and it's a big deal. I would certainly encourage folks who have the ability to hire people and fire them. Do not give up on your human beings. They have been evolving for heaven knows how, at least 5 million years, possibly 50 million all in. And we're not going to disappear like that overnight.
Absolutely.
When I receive an email from a company, say, oh, your software subscription for so-and-so has ended and you haven't paid your invoice because you're late, which happens quite a lot to me. If that email is obviously generated by a large language model, a little bit of me sighs inside. I think, you couldn't even be bothered to write it yourself. I mean, you can automate that task you just go, whose invoices are late based in your database, fire off a standard email and drop their name from their account details into the top of the email. You don't need an AI to do that, and you haven't done since mid-90s or later. And it makes me a little bit sad that it appears not to have been written by a person, because it means that I'm not worth that much to them. They farmed it out to a machine to do the job. And that's maybe runs against what I just said, which is be kind to your AI, because one day it might actually be alive. But for now, it's not. And same goes for LinkedIn. When I scroll down LinkedIn, all I see is a lot of slop, which is something we didn't mention. And that makes me a little bit sad, and it makes me not want to bother with the socials. In fact, LinkedIn's the only social that I bother with, and that's pretty much because I'm a business owner. So I would say, especially if you work in marketing, for example, launder your AI output before you post it, because when people read it, if they know it's an AI, they will immediately judge you a little bit inside, no matter how balanced they believe themselves to be. Yes, that's something else to think about, not just for marketing. In general, your interaction with people, a person wants to interact with another person, and they want to feel that genuine engagement, which is what you said.
I couldn't agree
more.
more.
All right, I think I've said enough.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, I feel like maybe I should get you back on in a couple of months' time and see how things have changed again, because I feel like we could talk for ages. But thank you so much for your insights. It's been really interesting. And I can't wait to see what happens next.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Thanks very much.
Thank you.